Hi everyone, and welcome to this YouTube channel. My name is Penny, and this is Penny's Coding Bits. This channel is dedicated to bring you weekly bite-sized videos with practical solutions to your everyday data analytical challenges. And this video is going to walk you through how to create a dashboard in R to keep track of all your holiday expenses. So let's see how this dashboard works. On the left-hand side, we have a panel where we can add a new category of expense and add expenses to a particular category and set budget limits for those categories. So if I want to add a new category called travel, I simply type that in and hit add category and everything refreshes. So on my plot, I have a new category called travel. And on my drop down menu, I have a new category called travel. And in the set budget limit section, I have a new category called travel. So let's see what if I want to add an expense of $3,000 to the travel category. There, I have it visualized instantly on the plot. And if I want to change the budget limit for the travel category, I simply type in 2000 and the plot automatically updates. And if I want to do the same for the other two categories, I simply type in my amount and just change the budget limit accordingly. There, I have all of my expenses for the holidays in one glance so that I can see where I'm over and where I'm short. So let's see the back end of this dashboard and look into the code that supports its functions. So first of all, in the user interface section, I'm adding a title called Holiday Budget Tracker. And in the sidebar menu, I have a text input called New Category, and there's a label called Add New Category. And there's an action button as well called Add Category, and there is a label for it called Add Category with a capital A and a capital C, which is right here. And for my add expense section, I am having a select input functionality, which is R's language of saying a drop down menu. So that's referring to this menu right here. And this menu has a name called category and a label with a capital C, category. So that will allow us to select the category that we would like to work with. And next, we have a numeric input called amount and a label called amount with a capital A. And this has a minimum value of 0. So we cannot put in a negative number in here. And this will default to 0 if we start off with a new dashboard. And there is an action button called Add Expense. And it has a label called Add Expense, which is right here. And at the bottom of this sidebar menu, we have the Set Budget Limit section. So that is right here in this code. And the contents of this section is called Budget Inputs, and that is a user interface output. So if we look down into the functionality code and we look for the user interface with the budget inputs, which is right here, we can see that we are organizing our budget limits by categories, and they will have a default value of 100 and a minimum value of 0. And on the right-hand side, which is the main panel, we have the budget plot, which is this section right here, and the budget summary, which is the text explanation down below. So let's look into the functionality codes that uses these user interface components to make the dashboard function. First of all, we need a reactive value to store our categories of expenses. So reactive value we have talked about in the previous video. It is a value that outputs the output from a user input. So in other words, the output will change depending on what the user has inputted into the system. And in this case, this has to do with our categories. So we have to name it as categories. And to begin, it will give us automatically in the dashboard the categories of gifts and food. Once we have this, we will be able to work magic with it in the following sections. So in the next code chunk, it says observe event input at category. So observe event is what exactly it sounds like. It observes for an event to happen. So it waits for this functionality to run in order to proceed with the following lines of code. So in this case, it's observing for the input add category, which is this button. So once this button is pressed and the new category is not empty, so new category is not empty, something is being inputted in here, then the code in R will combine the new category that's inputted with what's already in the category's reactive value so that we have a complete updated list of categories. And we can also use this newly updated reactive value called categories to update the select input menu, which is our drop-down menu. So like we have done before, it has updated this menu with travel, which is a new inputted category that's to be added to the category list. And with the newly updated categories, we would need to update our budget list as well. So we're calling in this category's reactive value as well in this section so that this travel section with a text input field is added in to set the budget limits for the travel section. And it will have a default value of 100 and a minimum value of 0. So when we have just started out with a newly added category, it will all have a budget limit of $100 to begin. And next, we will need to have a reactive value of a data frame. A data frame is basically a table of data with rows and columns in R. So we are defining this data frame to contain the categories that we have inputted as well as the amounts that we have inputted in the above section. And this will come in handy when we're plotting our plot on the right-hand side. Although this table is not showing in our dashboard, this is the back end functionality that's supporting this plot that we see in our dashboard. And next, we need to have a functionality that adds new expenses. So observe event for input of adding expenses, which is this button. So once this button is pressed, we need to have a data frame that's called new expenses that's containing the input of the newly added category and the amount for this category. And if the new expense category is not empty and the new expense amount is greater than 0, then we need to combine the newly added category and amount to the existing categories and expenses. And once we have these baseline functionalities ready, we will be ready to proceed to render our plot. So in this big section here, we are basically summarizing our actual expenses and the budgets by category. So this section is summarizing the actual expenses, and this section is summarizing the budgets, so that we have a table that have them side by side so that we can have a plot that plots both the actual expenses and the budgets together in one view. So we have something called the merge data that is doing this combining, and we need to fill in anything that is not having a number in this newly merged data frame to be 0, so that this plot doesn't have an error when it's trying to plot it. And using this merged data, we can plot a bar chart with the budgets and the actual spendings. And when we have them together in one view, this is what we see in our dashboard. And the last section would be to render this explanation section at the bottom of the plot. So instead of rendering a plot, we say render text. So this section is summarizing the expenses if the expenses data frame has information in it. So this line is basically saying if there is any row in this data frame, then run the below lines of code for me. And the first line below is the total expenses by category. And we also have the budget limits by category. And we are putting the categories to the names of the budget limits table so that we know what budget limits they belong to. So once we have these ready, we will put them into two variables. And to set the format of our printed text in this format, we will need to tell R that the summary text is equal to pasted. Pasted means pasting what's above to this line. And that consists of our summary text defined here, the categories, the amount spent, and the budget, which is what we see here. So that's all to this quick and easy dashboard to keep track of all your holiday budgets and expenses. I hope this will be helpful for you this holiday season. I'll see you in the next video.